Charles, I failed to get a cover of Bang Bang Maxwell Silver Slammer. Did nothing because they're not going to put her in jail.
Well, we'll soon find out. This is the art department. I don't know how the art department finds the time and cranks up the creativity to get something like this done the way it has done, time and again.
Why, thank you very much. This is a good one for sure. Sometimes they're inspired, and they just sort of come fairly easily. People who are familiar with the... it's interesting. Why are we not seeing the image there? Okay, there we go. People who are familiar with the cover of the Abbey Road album, Charles, will recognize this. And do you know what the cover is allegedly all about?
I do not.
Abbey Road? Well, there was this auto accident, apparently, that Paul McCartney was involved in like 1965 or 6. And then Abbey Road, which is one of the best-known Beatles albums there is, came out right after that. And there was this whole thing, and it exists today, a controversy about the possible death of Paul McCartney and replacement with a doppelganger. And this image is intended to represent sort of the funeral procession where John Lennon is depicted as a priest, Ringo Starr, the pallbearer, Paul McCartney, who is out of step with the other 3 Beatles and not wearing shoes, is the dead man. And when you play Revolution 9 backwards, it says, "Turn me on, dead man," and "I am the walrus" says, "Paul is dead, miss him, miss him." And then we've got George Harrison as the gravedigger. Now it's, in this version, we've got Dersh.
The Dersh.
Dead Ep. The elusive Ms. Maxwell. And of course, the most important thing being reported, Charles, is this In-N-Out burger. I don't know how that got there. There's no In-N-Out burgers in Liverpool, as far as I'm aware. And then, of course, we have the very slimy former president, Bubba Clinton.
Right. Well, I think this is a very important piece, and it comes at a very important time. And we've been working on this together now for, this is, I guess, we started in June of 2017. We've done several hundred, almost 250 podcasts. And I'd done a lot of work on the issue of whether the Clinton Foundation was or was not a fraud beginning in 2015, February. So there was a lot of material to study. We found out even more through the course of our collaboration. And it's the standard trick that a Dershowitz or a Clinton or the Clinton supporter might do is to encourage you to focus over in a certain direction. Because they've laid that ground, they know how to box on that ground. They don't want you to see the wider picture. Now that we've done, this is our 242nd podcast, now that we've done so many, I think it's important to take a step back and think about the wider context. We've all been sold a lie. And by all, I mean across the political spectrum. We've been sold this lie adroitly by the corporate-owned media, by academia, by institutions, by multinationals.
Coronavirus lie or something
I'm talking
else?
about a much bigger lie, that the United States is a declining nation. We should forget about nations. We should work towards global governance where nobody really understands how that will be run. And the people with the top 100 people, top 1,000 people in the world, they'll just steal everything. And what we'll do here is we'll have useful idiots put in place in the different national governments. We'll have conflicted people put in place like Tedros at WHO or you name it at the UN. And we'll make sure that we have dirt on everybody so that if people get out of line, either they go to jail or they go, to the
away.
great, exactly, away.
Yeah.
And when you look at this and you think about the Clinton situation, you think about an Epstein, you think about Ghislaine Maxwell, even, dare I say, about Dershowitz. Yeah. These people, various and sundry of these people are put up on pedestals. Bill Clinton was anointed by the time he got to Georgetown. He was going to be, somebody...
Georgetown?
Where he went to college.
I thought he went to Oxford.
No. First he went to Georgetown.
Oh.
We discussed that before, how unlikely that is. I mean, Georgetown is a very much a Catholic university, and Clinton was raised a Baptist, and the Baptists, I can attest because my grandfather was a Baptist minister, the Baptists and the Catholics do not like each other. So it is unusual that he, in my mind, that he would go there. If he's so smart, in such a high profile, he should have been able to go to an Ivy League university or something like that. Maybe he wanted to be in Washington, D.C. at a young age.
I want to ask you this, Charles. When you meet someone who you've later come to realize this is a really smart guy, how long does it take you to pick up on that? Pretty quick, right?
It can depend. Some of the smartest people I know don't want you to know how smart they are. So,
but even that sometimes reveals how smart they might be. Right. You can tell when somebody's dumb like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When they open their mouth.
I'm not impressed with Bill Clinton the 2 times that I've met him. He seems dumb to me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, he was anointed. I mean, now I didn't realize until recently that Fulbright was complicated. That Fulbright, back in the day, when he was a senator, it was okay in Arkansas to do all kinds of side deals and have banks lend you money, and so he was wealthy, but he made more money off being a senator.
Yeah, this is the guy who Larry Nichols told me is Bill Clinton's real father.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe
that's what Larry Nichols said.
Well, maybe, but when you read Bill's own book, there are lots of books now about the Clintons. And it's crystal clear that somebody decided back in 1968 that they're going to give Bill Clinton the Rhodes Scholarship, and then they're going to groom him for better things. And I think that Rhodes Scholarship grooming, and there are other societies like that grooming these people, is a standard practice. You're looking for strivers who are not going to buck authority. You're looking for people from shattered backgrounds.
Well, he's going to buck everything else he can.
Right, but you're looking for people who will be very grateful that they get, and they will remember who put them in the place that they got to be. And you ideally want brutally compromised, people with inner demons, so you can work to manage them so they get in a place where they compromise themselves, and you can always look at Bill Clinton and say, listen, you may be president now, but in 24 seconds, if I release this,
you're over.
You're toast.
So you mean perhaps someone who was accused of rape and selling cocaine while at Oxford? Maybe that could be
a prime candidate to be president of the United States. So they needed.
But the thing that's important about it, though, Charles, is that if you look at the category of rapists and drug dealers, at least the most obvious ones, very few of them could even integrate into high society and not be like Raz Simone, who is a self-proclaimed pimp. He's not going to go give a speech at the UN and have anybody, prior to 2020, but somebody like that who's dealing with, he's very direct street justice. He's the guy with the gun. He's taller than you. He's stronger than you. You're doing what he says. Right. He's not the diplomat. Like Bill Clinton is very good at appearing respectable, but he's actually a criminal scumbag.
Well, actually, when you read, there's a book, I'm trying to remember which book it is that I was reading recently that talked about, it might have been, it was by an Arkansas person, the guy, Jim McDougall. It was either his book or it was Jim Stewart's book about Bill Clinton in the early days. And that book, Stewart, of course, won the Pulitzer Prize and is an accomplished investigative journalist. I don't think he did a good job in that particular book. For example, he says in that book that Bill graduated from Oxford when he didn't. It's not
that's a minor
blood sport.
That seems like a huge error.
So in this book, written March 25th, 1996, published March 25th, 1996, i.e. before the Monica Lewinsky scandal became public, in this book, he recounts a story about how Clinton was a monumental fuck-up working for Fulbright. He got a job as driving Fulbright around, and he would just talk incessantly to some college kid, talking incessantly about Bill Clinton's opinions about politics and this and that, and all Fulbright wanted to do was sort of take a nap, getting ready to go to the next speech, and this guy talk, and the specific incident was Clinton was supposed to do something in relation to getting Fulbright to an event, and he managed to just completely screw the car up. And they left him and Fulbright in the middle of nowhere not being able to get to a place on time. And supposedly Fulbright said, I don't want this guy anywhere near me ever again.
Really?
So if that's true, I suspect that Fulbright was not, in fact, the father. But
we were just told by someone in our chat that Fulbright is a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah. Well, I was bringing that. So I think it's very clear that particularly in a state like Arkansas, where it's not a big population state, a sitting senator particularly a former Rhodes Scholar, has a lot to say about whether a certain Arkansas person makes it across the finish line because it's regionally, the exam is regionally, or the contest is regionally administered to ensure that they have representation from each region in the country. So I think, Fulbright decided, okay, you're going to be a Rhodes Scholar. And I think if we had real people doing investigative journalism, if John Solomon could break away from what he's doing on the Russia hoax and go over to Oxford and use Trump's contacts now that Boris Johnson is on his ass, not having finished his Brexit negotiation, badly needing a trade deal, the threat of Prince Andrew being exposed and all that. If Trump said to Johnson, listen, we're going to drain the swamp, and a key understanding that we need to share across the world is just what Bill Clinton did at Oxford. Why didn't he graduate at Oxford? Don't tell me you don't know. Don't tell me the MI6 doesn't know what really happened. Don't tell me there aren't records, because I know there are records here in the United States. I just don't know the British records. If you had that kind of a discussion, which I would be prepared to have if I were Trump with Boris Johnson, say, on the one hand, Boris, over here we have a scenario where, you're back in the special relationship, and we got a lot of good stuff we can do all over the world together. On the other hand, I won't return your phone call after I get reelected. Good luck trying to do Brexit. Good luck with a trade deal. We're going to negotiate a trade deal with Zimbabwe before we negotiate one with you. I mean, you could be pretty tough. Remembering that Boris Johnson was foreign minister, I don't know, immediately preceding the moment during the 2016 election. I think, let's check that actually. Was Boris Johnson?
Was he what?
Foreign minister in 2016, a nice picture.
Yeah, what's this thing on his lapel? It looks like an
That's a Veterans Remembrance thing, I think. Wiki.
You want an Espanol?
It goes on the right-hand side, it'll go...
Something is wrong with the...
If you go down the right-hand side of it.
Yeah, it wasn't showing up on the screen here. Okay. So
Leader, Commonwealth Chair, Secretary of State for Foreign and yeah, look at that. He was Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs right exactly during the period when the Steele dossier, right, 13 July 2016. This is just as Crossfire Hurricane was, or the predecessor of Crossfire Hurricane was amping up. He goes into the office as Secretary of State for Foreign, i.e. U.S. relations, 13 July 2016. This is when was Seth Rich found? Was it the...
July 10th? 6th?
Okay.
Something like that?
Yeah. Comey was the 5th. I think Rich we can look into it. But by the 13th, he goes in as Secretary of State. And just precisely then, John Brennan's CIA, Comey's FBI, and a myriad of folks are trying to manufacture this Russian hoax idea and use the Steele dossier and get the Steele dossier created. Don't tell me that Boris Johnson doesn't know a lot about what was really going on in the UK. And, I really think he needs to fess up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Charles. The other thing that was just rolling around in my head earlier today is that we are just dangerously deep into a period of Trump having not done enough about a lot of things, and I'm fearful that we are close to out of time for him to do anything.
Well, but so if we could just go back into that Abbey Road thing for a sec.
Sure.
So we have I focused on the leader of that pack, Bill Clinton, right? When Bill Clinton was at Oxford, Robert Maxwell was a superpower.
Right.
I mean, he was a big cheese. He was swanning around the world.
Soviet Union, Bulgaria.
He should have learned how to swim a little bit better. But And,
I think it's hard with that heart attack chemical in you.
Right. But so Ghislaine was, she's got a sister who's 70 years old. We're going to get to her in a second. She's got a lot of siblings. But she was on top of the world. She thought she was, in the aristocratic clique, although her father, if you may remember, I think was born in
Hungary?
No, Czechoslovakia.
All right.
And so, and it's unclear. I mean, he's got a murky past.
Well, it doesn't seem like Maxwell would be his actual name.
It's not his real name. Case. And then you have Epstein. Here's another guy with a sketchy background. I just got off the phone actually before I came over here with Alana Goodman, who assures me that she'd be most interested in coming on the Wednesday shows to discuss her book with Daniel Halper. But, we quickly chit-chatted, and I said, I'm sure you've done a lot of work on this, but Epstein's life story is a complete fairy tale. And she said, yeah, it's fabulous, which, means lying. So it's just fanciful. And how did Epstein, manage to go from being a kid with relatively modest background? How did he manage to go? Excuse me. To get into Cooper Union, which
his brother ruined later.
Yeah, but Cooper Union back in the day was a place where people across the country competed to get into it. And the good news was it was a top school, and if you got in, it was all free.
Right.
So here he's from a modest family, smart enough to get into Cooper Union, dumb enough to decide either he gets kicked out or not to finish his first year. Then he checks into a part, not supposedly NYU, but an institute associated with NYU, and he drops out of that, the Courtauld Institute. He drops out of that, and this is during the Vietnam War when there was a draft, and he was of draft age in his second year. Why didn't he go to Vietnam? How did he in that period get a job being, quote, an instructor at Dalton? How did he go from there to Bear Stearns? The press is falsely reporting to this day that he was a partner. He was managing activities at Bear Stearns. He was a limited partner. In our financial world, the analogy in your movie or in play world would be anybody can be a producer of a play on Broadway. It's just a question of knowing the team and putting some money behind it. And,
right.
And so he was a limited partner, which means you have limited liability, no role in management.
So in other words, if you bring in some big client or something, is that like an honorary? What is a limited partner versus an actual partner?
Well, in a limited partner, your risk of loss is limited to the investment that you put in the firm. So if you put $100,000 into Bear Stearns, all you can lose is the $100,000. And if Bear has a horrible year and they want to go around past the pot and say, well, look, we need to pay everybody, there's not enough money in the pot. If you were a general partner, you'd have to come up with $2 million. And most people with no say in management, don't want to put money up and have unlimited risk. So on the other hand, the general partners, their deal is, look, you're a limited partner, you take no risk. When we make a boatload of money, we carve that money up and you get, maybe 20% return. We'll take 1,000% return for the risk. Right. And that's basically the way it has always worked. And so Epstein was never a general partner at Bear Stearns. He was never in management at Bear Stearns. Indeed, there are various accounts he was kicked out of Bear Stearns. And then, to burnish his reputation from that point, he decides to go into business with a Ponzi scheme, con artist who goes to prison for a long time.
Isn't that the same thing
Stephen
that
Hoffenberg
Madoff did?
More or less, is a different path. But so here's a guy who, along the way in these type of elite circles, typically you are checked every step of the way. You're checked, in his day, and he was 3 years older than I currently am. If he were alive today, he would be 3 years older than I am. So we went through the high school and college and Wall Street period at the same time. And I can tell you, it was a rigorous check to get, into Yale and then to Harvard Business School and then to get to Dillon Reed and then, to move up the line to be head of the largest business at Dillon Read when I was 33. I mean,
hey,
you had to go through numerous checks, not only internal checks, but your clients and the deals that you were doing and the publicity and all this. And this guy,
this is one
Epstein,
of these places where you can't tell him the check's in the mail.
Exactly. And Epstein, as far as I can tell, I mean, what did he do during this long period? And then why all of a sudden did he was he able to create J. Epstein and Company and then say, look, other firms would be happy to have $1 million client. I will only accept a client who gives me $1 billion or more. I mean, that's just preposterous. It did not happen.
So somebody with 700 million and like, no.
No. And so, this guy, I mean, you have fuck up number one in Bill Clinton, right? If you really go back through his career, and in his own words, look at his own book. Again, page 33 of My Lies, he admits that his foundation bought his family's Hot Springs property because it had the money to do so, and he wanted to keep it, quote, in the Clinton family.
I mean, on stage in front of 3,000 people, he spoke about how great it was to go around the world selling pharmaceuticals. And when I asked him, what did you mean about selling pharmaceuticals? You're supposed to run a charity. He was like, huh? And then the woman knocked the cell phone out of my hand and he shouted at me like a thug in the street.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you son of a bitch, Bill Clinton.
Yeah, so you have that screw up. Then you have Ghislaine, daughter of a screw up. Then you have Epstein, a certified screw up. And then we get to the question of Dershowitz. Now, Dershowitz has a long and some would say distinguished career. I mean, it's certainly, unlike Epstein and unlike Bill Clinton and unlike these other people, he made it up the ranks and was a full professor, a tenured professor at Harvard at age 29. I mean, there are many law students who enter Harvard at age 29. Forget about being a tenured professor at age 29.
Now, wait a second. When you graduate, so if you went to college at 18 and graduated at 22 and then went to law school, it's 3 years, right?
Yeah,
so he's a lawyer for 4 years and he becomes a professor?
Yeah, so he could well have been trained, and he seems to have been trained as a top-notch academic type. He could well have punched the lights out in his courses. He could have selected his courses well. He could have schmoozed his professors well. But it does happen. There's another guy, I heard him in a panel, who's got I think the same chair that Dershowitz now has. I forget the guy's name. And I went to one of these Bloomberg debate shows in NYU, in one of those halls there. And
I've decided that all of these places are giant toilets. There's
right.
nothing about them that's...
And this guy, his successor, was in my view, a complete bonehead. But he's lionized. He was making all kinds of impeachment arguments.
His eyes
right,
are lionized.
So my initial statement is we've been sold this big lie that the United States is in decline, globalism is on the rise, manufacturing is so last century, the knowledge economy is what we want to dominate, and let's all play along with that. Let's loosen standards. Let's everywhere in everything, and let's embrace these concepts that nobody can check. Let's embrace these charities that are not audited, and schools that are not controlled, and corporations that are not controlled. And let's just all, have a nice time and play around, and don't look too carefully at what's happening to the average American worker and the average American family, and in particular the inner cities. And this is something that has been sold to us. You could say back to 68. 68 was the Great Society. Around 68 was the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson. So we're now in the final stages of a battle between the independent upstart, Donald Trump, who himself may or may not be compromised in certain ways. I mean, we don't yet know the true story of his tax situation. We don't know why he hasn't taken a big bat out against the IRS and said, listen, you cannot have the lowest learner situation and all these charities being used as playthings for people who are trying to launder their reputations with their ill-gotten gains in their monopolistic and near-monopolistic enterprises that should have been broken up long ago. I mean, there's got to be, I accept that the IRS is gigantic. I've had extensive discussions with Larry Doyle, who's talked recently to a whistleblower from the IRS, who said, you guys just don't have no clue. I mean, there's a few top people at the IRS, and then there are tens of thousands of bureaucrats who are in this to pay themselves bonuses, either because they let people off lightly, or they catch the lowdown people.
What the hell is that about?
I know, and the guy's I think named Steve Henk, Henk. He's written extensively, and at some point when we get back to slides, I'll provide links on it. So, the IRS is corrupt. We see in the Justice Department, even under Bill Barr now, and you might say especially under Bill Barr, but in the last 24 hours, there's been a revelation that Sidney Powell, the lawyer for Michael Flynn, has just recently got yet another batch of exculpatory information that the Justice Department chose to withhold until yesterday. I mean, this is just unacceptable, right? I mean, you cannot have, it's actually bad for the people in the Justice Department to leave it out there the way this is out there. If the public suspects that the Justice Department is inherently corrupt, then the public is going to stop cooperating.
Well, that's when they bring out the police. But I think most people are well beyond suspicion and are fully convinced that the Department of Justice is totally corrupt.
Well, I think there are elements in the Department of Justice that are not corrupt, and I hope that Durham is not corrupt, and I hope that his team is not corrupt, and I hope, frankly, that Barr is truly trying to clean things up on his way out of his final post in his career. But
I don't think that's the case, Charles.
We're going to find out. So there's this. We have this scenario now that we talked about Epstein from the very, very beginning. We were highly suspicious of the original fable about Epstein. And the central focus in my work is to expose the charity fraud, particularly that of the Clinton Foundation. And one thing that wraps together that picture you had is the letter that you had found.
Oh, right.
That maybe we should talk about a little bit. And if we can, I don't know if it's the whole letter, but the letter contains, there it is. This is a letter dated July 6, 2007. Now let's think about July 6, 2007. July 6, 2007, the Clinton Foundation people absolutely knew that they did not have lawful authority to engage in HIV and AIDS activities, fighting HIV and AIDS activities internationally. They also knew that Hillary Clinton was well down a track of being President of the United States. She had announced on January 20th, 2007. They knew that Unitaid was going to open up a mother load of money towards the Clinton Foundation because that decision was made and announced by September 19th, 2006. So the Clintons had the money to finance her presidential campaign, but they had a really serious problem in Epstein, because Epstein figured centrally in the internationalization, in raising the profile of the Clinton Foundation, because Epstein, in September of 2002, lent his old plane to the Clinton Foundation to fly Ira Magaziner and others.
Old plane? What you
the 727? Yeah, the old 727.
Yeah.
And this is an extensive letter that was sent to the judges. Is this the correct thing? Is this the leniency letter?
I think so.
Okay. If we go...
It starts off by saying that 18 U.S.C. 2422 has nothing to do with this. That's coercion and enticement.
Mm-hmm. But let's get to the part where he's talking about Epstein's good works in the Clinton Foundation.
Can't search this because it's not yet...
It's towards the end, I think.
Seems lengthy. Is this the... Oh.
No.
Not sure if this is it.
Maybe a different letter. I want to say it's towards the end. Go back a little.
Here's Dersh's signature.
Yeah. Yeah, here we go. Philanthropy. Let's see. Not limited to financial support. Keep going. I think it's
good works, large and small.
I think the page right before this, or
Mr. Epstein sponsored and chaired symposia.
Here we go. Mr. Epstein was part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, note to Alan Dershowitz, probably not the best, I'm no lawyer, but probably not the best idea to seek leniency before a court by confessing to a massive fraud. Right? Mr. Epstein was part of the original group. Okay, so you wrote that statement, you sent it in a letter, using the mail maybe, or facsimile, into the Southern District of Florida. Chances are, Dershowitz, you were not in Florida when you did that. You signed this letter, so you sent it across state lines. Who else was in that original group? You say he was part of the original group. Who was in that group? Right?
He doesn't even remember having said it when he spoke to me a couple of weeks ago, and he said, well, it's probably true if it's in the letter. And it's like, what?
Oh, yeah. The dog ate my homework. So part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, the Clinton Global Initiative started functioning on November, I want to say 14th, 2004. And how do I know that? Because when you check ClintonGlobalInitiative.org, the name was registered by the Clinton Foundation on that date. Around that date.
Foundation.org?
Huh? ClintonGlobalInitiative.org, I think. Either .org or .com. But, so that's in 2004. That's before they gave the donation of the records, the presidential records, to the National Archive. So if you conceived of something, then chances are that something should fall within the charter of the non-for-profit, the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, which of course it didn't. The Clinton Global Initiative operated from New York, from an office that was never registered in New York. That
Water Street? 77 Water Street?
Later Broad Street, but Water Street. But no, the first Clinton Global Initiative was convened in September of 2005. There was no such Clinton Global Initiative name was never registered in the county of New York, which is required under New York law. And they never filed for federal tax exemption for a Clinton Global Initiative. And here he writes in a letter, it's described as a project, quote, bringing together a community of global leaders to devise and implement innovative solution to some of the world's most pressing challenges. I've always liked that sentence, to some of the world's most pressing. We're not going to do all of them. We're just going to do some of them. Well, how are you going to decide which are more pressing than others? And, to devise and implement innovative solutions to some of the world's most pressing challenges doesn't have anything to do with charity. You could do that and make money, right? By this statement, it is not the definition, a tight definition of a specific charitable purpose that is required in the charter of a charity.
So, Charles, I'm pretty sure this is the who is thing, and it's not even...
Well, try... who is lookup you want?
But I think that's what I got.
It used to be different.
Maybe I got it wrong. That's it.
Yeah, I can't look.
Okay, sorry.
Just try it without the dot. See what happens.
I don't think that...
You sure you're not right? No, we had it. Dot. Do you need to put in... There we go. November 15th, I was off by one day. Created November 15th, 2004.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 days before they make a grant to the National Archives, in which they state in the agreement, which of course that agreement is not on the Clinton Foundation website, we had to get it from the National Archives, they state that they are validly, the president of the Clinton Foundation, Skip Rutherford, says, we are a duly organized and operated public charity, organized to house the presidential records of the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock. 3 days before they sign that agreement, somebody at the Clinton Foundation gets that name. Can you go back to that name, or have you already?
No, it's here.
I just want to see. Does it list the address? Yeah, here we go. Organization, Clinton Foundation, mailing address, New York, U.S. That's interesting. Have you ever had a letter sent to you?
Yeah,
Jason Goodman, New York, U.S.?
Yeah. No, I have not.
Right. So the Clinton Foundation was operating in New York, in Bill Clinton's offices, that he got because he's a former president, in Harlem in 2004. We know that from many meetings that have been press releases that came out from that operation. And there was no such organization called the Clinton Foundation in New York. There never has been a validly organized entity called Clinton Foundation in New York. And this evidence is still out there. If you really were good at bleach bitting, you would say, well, maybe I should bleach bit this whole record. But then if you're super overconfident, the way the Clintons are, because they bamboozled the entire world, and particularly the New York administration. Yesterday we learned, for example, that for a much smaller fraud, the Black Lives Matter Foundation, the one in California, operating in New York, soliciting contributions in New York, the Black Attorney General of New York, a female, I don't know if you can find that press release or a story about it.
Already.
She has demanded that Black Lives Matter Foundation in New York cease and desist from raising any more money in New York.
It was here yesterday.
There you go.
Here we go. Yeah, this is interesting news, Charles, because it would seem that the current New York State Attorney General, her interpretation of the statute is identical to my own.
Yeah.
So that's quite curious, considering the lawsuit that was brought against me for someone who alleges that I ignored the facts when my facts seem to align with the Attorney General who would enforce this.
Every organization that seeks to solicit donations, not that gets them, but that seeks to solicit donations from New Yorkers must follow state laws. Now let's go up a little bit in here. Which organization? The Black Lives Matter Foundation. Okay? Now, the Black Lives Matter Foundation, if we go into the California registry, just to remind people, and I sent a note into the complaint box at the New York State Attorney General, this particular Black Lives Matter Foundation is a foundation that has a checkered situation in California.
But where was it? It was at the Attorney General page that we found that?
No, the California Charity Bureau. It's a California Bureau of Charitable Trusts. California Department of Charitable Trusts, yeah.
This?
Yeah, if you hit registry, if you go back up one, sorry. Hit this one here.
There you go, yeah.
And just put in Black Lives Matter Foundation, an organization name.
How about just Black Lives Matter?
That's fine. And then search. Okay, Black Lives Matter, you see, not registered, cease and desist order. That doesn't sound good, Jason. That doesn't sound good.
No.
Now we hit the link.
What's the guy's name? Hawk Hudson or something?
Hawk Newsom, but I don't know if this is, all right. This thing, cease and desist order, December 2, 2019. Okay? So well before George Floyd.
Yeah.
Well before George Floyd. CT 403 disallow, or you can do either one, that one. May 24th, 2018. So before George Floyd.
A day before.
Yeah. Okay.
Huh. So what do we think about that?
We think that, and this is from Xavier Becerra, who's the Democrat Attorney General of California, who had previously been a representative in California, who has got all kinds of very suspicious aspects to his past, including signing up the Awan brothers.
Yeah. Very suspicious.
So on the one hand, Letitia James decides to disallow Black Lives Matter Foundation, or to put the kibosh on Black Lives Matter Foundation for its activities in New York. The California AG has gone after them. This is May 24th, 2018.
Oh, wow. So it's 2 years in one day before they killed George Floyd.
Right. And so this thing has never been validly registered, even in its home state, let alone in New York. But that turns on the question. The next question is, okay, so who else is raising money in New York for Black Lives Matter? And we could go back over the ground there. If we go into the New York Charity Bureau, actually Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, right?
Yeah, the entity search.
This?
And you put in Black Lives Matter, and don't put, you just put in Black Lives Matter and search, and then it's going to put you to a new page.
But do you want?
You'll have to go anyway to you see search database.
All right.
You're going to redo that.
Oh, right.
So yeah, so you have to do it again.
Because this is such a well-designed web page.
And then you have to put 16764. Search the database. Okay, there are 5 entities. Black Lives Matter Greater New York, Black Lives Matter Inc., and Black Lives Matter United Inc. Let's look at Black Lives Matter Greater New York. Okay, this is the one that Hawk Newsom is involved with. This was set up December 14th, 2016 at 955 Sheridan Avenue, which I believe somebody has looked in to see is not really much of an address. It could be a UPS store or something like that.
Oh, in the Bronx? Let's take a look at that.
We'll see if that's right or wrong. But if you go down the page a little bit, it doesn't say does it give a name of anybody?
Well, didn't it say?
Before, I thought
Well, it's confusing because there's so many of these things.
Okay, this is not a not-for-profit. This is a for-profit entity, domestic business corporation, right?
Right, and remember he had...
Then if you go back up, there's another one.
Black Lives Matter Inc., I think, is the 501c3.
That's another domestic
business corporation.
Right.
Okay, June 8th, 2020, Jobs, Real Estate, United.
Where's New York Black Lives Matter?
I don't know, maybe it's gone.
It was in there. We have it on tape actually when we did it. What's Black Lives Matter United Inc.? What's that one? That's domestic. That's another one.
Maybe they've eliminated them because they know that they're fraud.
Is this active? This is all? But try New York Black Lives Matter and see what you can get.
Begins with, let's just say, contains.
New York Black Lives Matter Inc. There you go. Okay, this is a domestic not-for-profit. This is Hawk Newsom at this 955 Sheridan Avenue. This entity is still soliciting money. And none of these Black Lives Matter entities are registered as charities in Tish James and Letitia James' home state of New York.
This looks like an apartment building.
That's an apartment building, yeah. So it doesn't look like a particularly nice apartment building.
Well, it's the Bronx. I mean, that looks like probably where the guy lives.
Yeah.
955 Sheridan Avenue. So, all right. But, I mean, the one that he's got registered as a nonprofit.
Oh, so that's the New York Black Lives Matter. Now let's go into the charity search for...
But it's important for people to know that this Department of State, this is just where any corporation gets registered. It's not something that allows you to be legally collecting money from
right.
501c3.
It's like you've gotten an ID number.
Right. So now which one do we want to look at?
The New York State Charity Bureau.
New York State Charity Bureau.
And yeah, now put in New York Black Lives Matter. And you come up with Bupkis. Nobody.
Right. So they've created companies, but they haven't properly registered them as charities with the Attorney General. Letitia James, who is presently the Attorney General, yesterday said you cannot do that.
Well, if you go to that press release, back to the press release, it contains warnings. You could apply everything she says about Black Lives Matter Foundation applies to the Clinton Foundation.
It also applies to other 501c3s from other states that haven't properly registered with the state attorney general.
Yeah.
And she does quite clearly say, as you pointed out, Charles, every organization that seeks to solicit donations from New Yorkers, including on this program, including when they're hanging out with George Webb, including when they try to sue me, if they want to raise money by soliciting donations from New Yorkers, they must follow state laws.
Yeah, and you see, they got to stop soliciting. They got to tell people raising money on behalf of the entities to stop. And they got it, even though they haven't registered, they have to file all the financial reports that were required for the periods of time in the past when they raised money. In other words, you've got to confess to charity fall. Now, if you go to, and then she gives these tips: check before giving. Do you think Harvard did that with the Clinton Foundation?
No.
Bill Gates did that? Did Unitaid do that? Ask how your donation will be used. You know, how would Bill Clinton say hookers and blow? Be careful when giving through social media.
That's something I learned the hard way.
Right. Exercise caution before you text a contribution. Don't give cash. You know, that would really screw up the Clinton Global Initiative if you couldn't give cash. And report suspicious organizations. So, to our audience, you know, I took this to heart and I immediately reported what I knew yesterday to this exact line, this exact link. I mean, there are multiple Black Lives Matter scams ongoing in New York City under the not so watchful eye of Letitia James, and she has a choice to make. Is she going to stand up and be counted and enforce the laws not simply against Hawk Newsom? She's got to enforce the laws against Bill Clinton and against Hillary Clinton, a former senator and Secretary of State, and Chelsea Clinton, all residents here in New York City, and state rather. She has to enforce the law. She's going to go after Hawk Newsom. She's going to go after these Black Lives Matter Foundation, you know, for $4 million or $5 million bucks. She's got to go after the largest criminal conspiracy of charity frauds ever attempted anywhere in the world, which is based right in New York City.
But will she? Because, you know, when I read there was a press conference, and also when you go through that whole thing, and she had a couple of tweets associated with it, she's doing it because obviously as a black person, it's going to look really bad if you appear to be going against Black Lives Matters. And I presume she does support it because she's probably a Democrat and a liberal.
She's definitely a Democrat.
Yeah.
She's a progressive, not a liberal.
Right. So she loves it. And she's saying, don't give to that Black Lives Matter thing because it's a fraud, but here's the real, you know, right? I mean, didn't she say something
Yeah,
along
well,
those
that
lines?
was her. I mean, it's admirable that she did quickly do that, but now she's in quicksand because she's only identified part of the problem. There's a much more serious problem, which is Hawk Newsom. And the 5 companies that were 6 companies that we identified that are fraudulently have been and are fraudulently engaged in holding themselves out as charities when, you know, some supporters of the movement are basically saying, oh, we have no interest in charity. We just want to burn the country down and replace it, you know, with some other way of doing stuff.
Is that an improper use of a 501c3?
It's a close call.
As I read the statute, it seems to be. I could be wrong. I'm not a tax expert.
You know, we want to stand in the shoes of government. You know, what we want to do here is we want to take the government that exists, burn it, and then we'll stand in the shoes of the new government that we'll create on the ashes of the old government. It's just on the face of it, it's not even worth discussing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Well, we'll have to see.
Well, here we go. Attorney General letter cites similar problem in California. According to the letter, California revoked the entity's tax-exempt status.
I think they're watching this show, Charles.
Let's see. Does it have the actual letter that was sent?
Well, we had the letter, didn't we?
We didn't have her. We had a press release. We didn't have her letter.
Her letter?
Her letter.
Oh, I thought you meant Xavier Becerra's letter. I think that her letter is on I was looking at it yesterday on the New York Attorney General website. Issued a notice. There it is.
All right. Email to info@blmfoundation.org. I mean, this is a letter that needs to go to the Clinton Foundation. It needs to go to the American India Foundation. It needs to go to the Clinton Family Foundation. It needs to go to the International AIDS Trust, the Clinton Global Initiative, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, Clinton Climate Initiative. It needs to go to the Clinton Justra operation and many more.
Yeah.
But this is very helpful to anybody who wants to understand how strict New York law is on the books.
Please take notice that Section 172 of Article 7A of New York's executive law requires charitable organizations that solicit contributions in New York State to register and file annual reports. And depending on the amount of their revenue, annual audited financial statements. So the depending on amount of revenue doesn't even come into play until you've registered.
Right. And then you had, they've not registered with the Charities Bureau.
Right. These are all the same complaints and warnings I had given to the public as a matter of public interest with regard to a public.
Yeah, let's look at this thing. Black Lives Matter Foundation engaged in charitable solutions. It must file all delinquent financial reports for such years. So that would apply to the situation you're talking about and to the Clinton Foundation.
Yes.
And the Clinton Foundation is huge.
Yes.
You know, it's very, and the fundraising activities were substantial, and they were being carried on at a time when Hillary Clinton was seeking election as to the U.S. Senate, re-election to the U.S. Senate, election to the U.S. president, and then election to the president again.
The other thing that's interesting about the situation that I'm talking about, Charles, is that even if we weren't correct, which this document seems to indicate, sorry, not we, this has nothing to do with you, even if I was incorrect, I didn't know that. If they can show now that I'm incorrect, then Letitia James is also incorrect. But there's a lot of information that causes me to believe that someone not following these rules is committing fraud.
Right. Each solicitation, so each request.
Yes, it's many. Wouldn't it be such a great idea for that person to rectify that situation before it's too late? Yeah. Or maybe it is too late.
Does the letter go on?
It does. Additional information concerning registration. I mean, it's just sort of standard stuff.
Oh, this is James G. Sheehan, bureau chief. It gives his email address.
Wow. I'll be emailing that person later today.
Yeah.
And the phone number. Ooh.
Yeah, I would suggest that members of the crowd might be interested in perhaps sending emails to Mr. Sheehan, encouraging him to, if you really care about enforcing the charity laws, why don't you do a real hard look at, I don't think that's the same guy. I think you misspelled it. I think it's Sheehan.
Was he in the Attorney General's office?
Charity Bureau, but he's chief of the Charity Bureau.
Here we go.
Harvard Law School.
What? Ha! Oh boy.
Here we go.
See, we need more access to these type of public, this is part of the problem, is that I think we're getting closer to a situation, Charles, where people can access these types of, what would you classify? He's a public servant, right? If he's working for the charities thing. Like, I mean, back in the day, before we had the internet, we would never know that guy, that letter, how to reach him.
But what I was going to suggest, Jason, is if we could go back to the actual letter, that members of the crowd might think about sending emails to Mr. Sheehan saying, hey, you're focused on this Black Lives Matter thing. Have you seen this episode of Sunday with Charles on the Clinton Foundation? Have you seen the financial whistleblower bounty hunters, Larry Doyle, and their work? Have you seen their testimony before Congress? Why are you going? One thing that really actually...
They'll get accused of being racist.
Well, one of the things that I think is a fair thing for minorities to be upset about is that when crimes occur and examples are made, the examples get made of the black men and women for small crimes. So here's the Barnes out in Black Lives Matter Foundation in California is a peanut charity. You've got Corinne Brown, was $1 million. She's in prison for 5 years. She's black and a woman.
That's a good point.
And, when time comes to discipline people for transgression, you either go after celebrities like Donald Trump, who can afford to pay the fines, and some would say have had it coming to him, or you go after Corinne Brown, who I guess is out now because of the COVID-19
Well, that's
thing.
actually good, but our friend Steve Stockman is not out of prison, and he is certainly at severe risk given his health.
And Roger Stone is about to go to prison.
Did they send him?
That
really is, even if people dislike Roger Stone, that really is wrong. I was watching the police commissioner, the guy who got down on his knee the other day, and a couple top guys from the NYPD gave a press conference yesterday talking about the number of people that were released from Rikers Island. Rikers Island is at 50% capacity, and they're not arresting anybody. Well, they're arresting people, but this bail thing is letting them out.
Right.
And they gave the number of rearrests of people
Very
who
high.
had been, and it's like stabbing people, shooting people, robbing stuff.
Right.
And 98% of the people that they wanted to release, NYPD said, no, don't release these guys. So what they've done is they've released violent criminals, which how smart do you need to be to know that if you release a violent criminal, they're going to do violent crimes? That ties up the cops to go definitely arrest those guys again. And then they've defunded the cops.
Right.
And they've got everybody else burning their cars up and throwing crap at them so that when I get assaulted, they just don't want to interface with anybody.
Right. Right. But so here we have, yet another case in point that we're going to go after. Letitia James, a black woman, is going to go after Black Lives Matter people for small crimes and let the first African American president and the second African American president, that would be Bill Clinton and then Barack Obama, skate for massive charity fraud at both foundations, the Bill Clinton Foundation and the Obama Foundation. And for that matter, is going to turn a blind eye to the frauds that may have been ongoing, with the various George W. and H.W. Bush foundations. I mean, it sends a corrosive message to the public at large, which is that, actually what matters is not black lives or all lives. What matters are the politicians in elections, because the dirty politicians you pay them off to make sure that you don't get prosecuted or that they prosecute your enemies, right? Or if you don't pay them off, you're going to get prosecuted. You increase the market value of political clout. And that is not the message. I don't think that when people catch their breath and think about it across the political spectrum, nobody wants that system. Nobody wants this, except maybe the corrupt politicians who think they're going to get away with it forever. Nobody wants a system where your elected officials rule you and can persecute you.
What's what we have now?
Well,
Cuomo, de Blasio.
DeCrazio.
You can't leave. You can't go into the supermarket. You can't go to this state or that state or the other state or 14 other states. But if you do, you're going to come back and lock in your apartment, or we're going to beat you up and smash your head into the ground. But if somebody assaults you, there's no cops.
Right. Call 911.
Call 911. Right.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. It's really crazy. So, Charles, specifically with regard to this alleged arrest and proposed arraignment of Ghislaine Maxwell on Friday, we spoke quite a lot last night on More Pain, which people can go back and see on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We spoke about some of the anomalies of this arrest. Like, first of all, no mugshot, no booking photo. Now, Mike Moore says that recent changes, according to people he spoke to at the U.S. Marshals, for federal cases, they sometimes don't release the mugshots, and he seemed to indicate that it had something to do with the preference of the suspect, which I don't understand why that would be, but okay. The other thing is the arraignment is supposed to happen
quickly.
Yes, and this is days. And it's not like they were bringing her from some foreign country. New Hampshire, you could drive there in like 4 or 5 hours. So I don't understand what took so long. Additionally, they've got her in not the Manhattan Correctional Facility where Dead Ep was, allegedly hung. They've got her in the Brooklyn Correctional Facility. So the Intercept had some story about that jail in May.
Yeah,
and
COVID overrun.
Wait a minute. They've got a series of stories here. I haven't seen this one before, so here's another one. So they've been doing like a little mini-series on this Brooklyn jail, which they're now, why would they put Ghislaine Maxwell in their Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn? This is exactly where she is. Destroying medical records. So this guy, Nick Pinto, he's doing a lot of writing about this thing, and so he seems to have sick call requests from federal jails. So people desperate for medical attention. This is June 21st. He's done several articles about this. I didn't know that. I thought there was just one. So I feel like they preemptively laid the groundwork to tell everybody, oh, she got coronavirus in the jail and now she's dead. Sorry, case closed.
Well, again, this is one of the reasons why I've been saying that if you really want to wrap this case up, you've got to focus on every project, every significant project that was ostensibly carried out through the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, I don't know if that, let's check and see if that website is still up. We have, Clinton Global, search our commitments to action.
It's just what, Clinton?
Just try Clinton Global and commitments to action.
Clinton Global Initiative.
That's funny. And then, yeah, there you go. Commitments. It is in the second at the top there. Next to the right, yeah. Browse through our current list to get inspired.
Right. Small business optimization and growth. First, we'll smash your windows in. Then we'll burn the place down and make it so nobody wants to go there, and it will be optimized.
And comic relief.
Breaking the cycle of generational poverty. How is that comic relief?
I don't know.
Charles, this is a crazy website.
I mean, it's literally as if a bunch of people in college had a room filled with pot and another room filled with munchies. And they just said, let's see if they buy this one. Can you top that one?
Back to ocean schools, Charles. Building the marine sector.
I mean, why does the Caribbean Tourism Association, Expedia, why do they need charitable help?
Right, they got to be rich.
What's all this stuff with Caribbean and child development?
Somebody had said something. I think Bishop Gators said something about why they want the organs from black people for some genetic reason.
But I mean, I think you have a function at the very bottom where it says search our commitments to action.
At the bottom? Boy, that's a long list, Charles.
There are 3,700 of them.
I'm surprised it's not 3,300.
Yeah, search all commitments to action. And for the hell of it, let's put in Maxwell.
Wasn't her thing called
Terramar? But let's just put in Maxwell to see if she...
The letters are so small in this.
You got it. That's right. 5 commitments to action.
Oh.
Source. Sustainable Oceans Alliance. There it is.
That's
in 2013.
Yeah, Terramar.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh boy.
Right. So I mean, what the 193? Yeah. If the folks at the Justice Department were serious about this, what they would be doing is they would take every single commitment to action, and they'd create a warehouse, and they would have people go systematically through every single one of these supposed commitments to action. Were the commitments made? If so, were they made to a real charitable organization? Where's an accounting of all this money? Did people derive personal benefits through the operation of any of these commitments to action? This is the center of the Clinton Foundation fraud, the Clinton Global Initiative. The entity never existed. When it was most active, Doug Band, who has built a gigantic financial conglomerate called Teneo and consulting operation, investment operation around the Clinton Global Initiative, which is strictly forbidden under charity in New York, from an office in New York. The headquarters of Teneo was in New York. The headquarters of the Clinton Global Initiative was in New York.
I wanted to ask you about this, Charles, because it was big news yesterday. And so you saw this, I'm sure, right?
I saw this, and I also saw a brutal podcast that our friend from Norway sent me. It's really worth watching.
But it's also very recent, right? I mean,
it's outrageous.
Well, wait a second, though, because look at what our buddy Mike Moore, he's the one who broke this story, and he had it last year. And suddenly now everybody is talking about it.
Yeah. Well, the way this kind of stuff may work is that there are a lot of bankers around the world who are prepared to, they're hungry for business. Interest rates are low. It's tough to find investment capital, so you can always find one of these large firms to do something for you if another firm won't do it. And if you have a crooked Justice Department and you have a crooked IRS and a crooked FBI, then you can get away with this kind of stuff. But I remember when I was living in Millbrook, I had to put some money into an account, and I needed to take out, I think it was $5,000 or something. And the guy said,
ask you all kinds of questions.
The guy said, what do you need that money for? I said, it's my fucking money.
Exactly. I mean, you gotta pay your mother, buddy. Give it to me.
It was like I didn't get really lippy with the guy, but I mean,
Sorry.
You're asking me what I'm going to do with my money. It's my money. But to the notion that you can go to a bank and say I need to get $100,000 out in cash for tips and household expenses, of course.
Yeah.
I mean that just would never fly in a real bank. And so why was Deutsche Bank doing this? I remember Deutsche Bank is basically controlled by the German government, heavily influenced by the German government, but they bought Bankers Trust, which was a large U.S. bank that had trouble. And there's probably a lot of skeletons in the Deutsche Bank book, in the Bankers Trust book. A lot of bad deals. Epstein was involved, did a lot of sketchy deals, probably using one or more of these big banks. And what's so shocking about the file, as the podcast explains, is it goes page after page of, we put this, there are the laws, you got to check the background of Epstein. The check comes back and says, well, he's a convicted felon, he's a child molester, he's a sex trafficker. Perfect. Put him in the platinum program.
Kind of guy.
We'll put him in the platinum program. Let's introduce him to Bill Clinton. Oh, he already knows Clinton.
Exactly. And the Rothschilds.
So it's just shocking the way the regulatory system would have these rules on the books and then give such discretion to the regulators. We're not going to prosecute any Democrats. We're going to go.
Sorry, people are asking me what the podcast is. I'm just trying to find it here. It was on The Hill. I'll get it for everybody.
Yeah,
I didn't mean for that sound to come.
The last name of the guy doing is Engete, Sagar and Jetty or something.
Right now.
Yeah, and it's really, he does a very good job. He used to work for the Daily Caller. I don't know whether he's still at the Daily Caller or somewhere else, but it's a pretty professionally done podcast. And he recounts with considerable shock. There's a long record. It's like a 40-page document here. They recite, what the people found with Deutsche Bank and why Deutsche Bank had to pay $150 million fine. I think that's just the trunk of the elephant. I mean, it's not even, they haven't really gotten to the real meat of all this. And so I think the corruption.
Here it is.
You got it?
Yeah, I'll put the link in for everybody, but this is the podcast.
Rising, yeah. Sagar and Jetty, that's it, yeah. And the bank determined that basically Epstein was using bank funds to fund the sex trafficking ring. I mean, can you imagine in this day and age, you go to your local bank and say,
should he not have done that?
Yeah, you go like, Mr. Goodman, why do you need $200 million? Well, these international sex trafficking operations, they're not cheap. I mean, I'm minding the expenses. I only fly around this crappy little 727. Don't ask me why I use it.
Don't go to the back.
Yeah. Right. But it's just amazing to me that it would take this long to bring Deutsche Bank to close to justice, and are they really being tagged the way they should be? And that brings me to the whole area of Germany. We get these lectures, and I'm someone who's original American. The person who arrived first in America with the name Ortel, who I'm related to, came from what it was then known as Prussia, but today is Germany. And now, many, many years later, 170 years later, I'm sitting here as an American wondering, why do we consider Germany an ally? I mean, here's Deutsche Bank giving us lectures about the financial system, and we don't know what we're doing, and Americans are idiots. How come you can't decide, as the regulators in Germany, that something's badly wrong with, Jeffrey Epstein's loans to Deutsche Bank, at the same time he's trafficking women and flying them around the world? I mean, what do the German regulators know about this? And by the way, that's pretty funny.
This is a good meme.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, World War II, is that your Cuban girlfriend or your Canadian?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. But by the way, World War II was over in 1945, and please explain 75 years later why we have
Still
bases
military there? Yeah.
in Germany, and why Germany is not funding its NATO commitment, and why Germany is, so all in to support Iran, as Iran then goes against American and NATO interests around the world. Explain all that to me, and why, we got World War I to think about, World War II to think about, is Germany about to get us into World War III?
Aren't we already in it since September 11th, 2001?
Yeah, it could well be.
People in the chat are saying that Dershowitz is easily triggered. And I agree with that because he seemed to start twitching out and blinking a lot when I was asking him questions that he didn't like. And now a lot of people send me like classic Dersh, like, what is he doing here? So there was some interview with Amy Goodman, who, when I've encountered her in the street and said a couple things to her, she also acted really weird. I met Amy Goodman outside the movie theater. One of the very first things I ever did for Crowdsource the Truth, I was interviewing people outside Trump World, whatever that Michael Moore movie that he made. And Amy Goodman was there. And I said to her, hey, I've developed this open source fact-checking method. And she just immediately walked away as soon as I said that.
Fact-checking? That's not good. That doesn't help my business.
But so Dersh was on Amy Goodman, I guess it was Democracy Now!, but it was pretty early, like 2005 or something like that. And I forget the name of the guy who was questioning, but he was like some kind of English professor talking about this book that Dershowitz had plagiarized, and Dershowitz was freaking out and blinking and twitching all over the place.
What book is that?
I got to find it. It's in an email over here. I'll send it to you later. But it was somehow plagiarized from Mary. Yeah. I don't remember. I've watched so many of these different things.
So speaking about plagiarism in academia, though, another thing that's happened in the last several days or so is that these genius universities, Harvard included, have announced, Harvard has announced that they have a perfect plan for the school year coming up. They are going to insist that all courses be online, that up to 40% of the students will be allowed to be on the campuses, and that they're going to charge you $50,000 tuition for taking online courses and not being able to have your kids on the campus.
Sounds like a great deal, Charles.
I mean, it's
even
like
better deal than the old deal.
So I guess cannabis and worse has been legal in Massachusetts for a long time. And then in addition, so Trump counters, the Trump administration counters and says, well, if you're going to be doing online instruction, there's no need to have foreign students, come into this country.
Right, that's even newer. Whoa, wait a minute. I heard about that, but I didn't realize. So Harvard's fighting back. They're like, wait a minute, this is going to screw up our whole program to bring in Chinese spies.
Well, and the other thing, when you really think about it, you go from various backgrounds to these universities. I had the pleasure of going to Yale and to Harvard, and you arrive there, and your roommate could be the son or daughter, son of, if you're a man in the beginning.
By the end, you might not be a man if you go today.
Right. But you start out anyway, and your roommate is the son, could be the son of a king or a president or a billionaire, or it could be the son of somebody who doesn't know, or it could be somebody who doesn't even know who his parents are, who lives on the street. There are street people, homeless people who have gotten into these universities. So you say,
how did they do that?
Because they're super fucking smart. And these are kids, typically, of parents who fall on hard times and they live on the street. There's several very touching stories of really moving stories, frankly. So you take somebody like that, and the bottom, economically, the bottom half of any of these Ivy League classes is not well off. I mean, they've gone to great lengths to attract. Well, Princeton, you go for free. So below a certain income level, you go for free, and you get living allowance and everything else. So you go to the poor group and you say, okay, here's the news. You don't have to pay the $50,000, but you're going to have to do that online course, from the ghetto in Chicago. And good luck. I wouldn't put that computer too close to the window.
Right.
So it's not a very thoughtful solution at all. And now to go sue the administration at the same time, the administration, I hope, is looking at these financially well-endowed universities and saying, now, wait a minute. Exactly why are you tax exempt? Harvard Law School,
right?
Harvard Business School, Why is that a tax-exempt activity? What you are doing is you are giving people professional credentials. You make the argument in your recruiting that you should pay the cost of these places because you'll more than make the money back as a lawyer, as an investment banker, as a consultant. There's no part of that is charitable, in my mind. Now, you want to argue that the English department of Harvard might be charitable, or the anthropology.
Nobody gets a job after they leave there.
Well, no, but that's precisely why educational institutions were given charitable status, because they wanted to make sure that teachers, would be that people would continue to teach other people, and so recognizing that teachers wouldn't make money, the tradition is that institutions of learning should be tax exempt if they are, organized and operated lawfully. So just at the time that, I hope the IRS and the Justice Department is looking at this cartel that is, until recently, was primarily, soaking in lots of money from around the world. And here's a fundraising session. I don't know if this is a mock-up or an actual.
No, this is real.
Yeah,
there's other pictures of these guys wearing the same clothing, I guess, on the same day.
Yeah, where Epstein, somebody who, now, I grant you, there are people who are, who never went to college. There's this guy, this famous Indian guy who was a post office clerk who just had a problem he was working on, and he couldn't solve it. So in order to solve it, and he's a self-taught guy, he invented a new branch of mathematics and sent his question into the dean of either some serious guy at Oxford or Cambridge saying, look, please excuse this, but I think I had a problem and I think I've solved it. And the thing, arrives from India. This is in the early 1900s. It's like fleas and everything falling apart. And the Oxford Don or Cambridge Don looks at it and says, well, maybe not. And then they look at it and they say, holy shit, this guy is, one of the smartest mathematicians ever.
Wow.
And the sad end of the story is they convinced the guy to go to England and interact, and he dies of bad reaction to the weather.
What?
Yeah.
Bad reaction to the weather?
He was hot, really hot in India, and he goes to Oxford or Cambridge or wherever. If you look up famous Indian mathematician, it's a long name, and I would slaughter it because I don't remember it. But it's
dying from a negative reaction to the weather.
Oxford or Cambridge.
Sounds like something.
That's that guy. Yeah, Srinivasa Ramanujan. This guy.
But dying of the weather, Charles, it sounds like something that would happen in Arkansas.
Cambridge it was, yeah.
Man who knew infinity.
Yeah, this truly was a monumental intellect, this guy. So you can have people who are just so smart they don't have time for university. But on the other hand, just at the time where people are looking at a Harvard or Yale or Princeton and saying, it's $70,000 a year sticker. You got 4 years of that. Then you have to get graduate credential, 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, maybe more. And what are you going to earn at the end of the day? What's the likelihood you're going to earn enough money to pay those loans off or to pay back your parents or whoever, gave you that money? It's a substantial amount of money. So just at the time when people are rightfully questioning, does it make sense at all
to go to college,
to go to these type of, in this day and age, Harvard comes up with a bright idea. You know what? That college experience, we're going to make it even worse than it is.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a chance to socialize, which is an important thing on your own. I mean, in my own case, going from high school to college, I left
development.
Yeah, I left my parents' direct control, and I'm on my own in a new setting where I get to, shape relationships and meet friends and learn and stuff. That's very valuable. You say suddenly you're going to do that online, it's not $50,000 a year, or it shouldn't be.
It's not worth it at all, because honestly, I am firmly convinced that in today's day and age, a smart person who wants to figure something out, you could build a house from looking stuff up online. I learned how to use a 3D printer and built stuff for the newest camera that I made. So when I did that, I said to myself, why would you need to go to college? And I thought back, and so much of it is sitting there, listening to a lecture, reading a book, taking a test.
Yeah, the whole system needs to be reformed. Why are we on a schedule, the same agrarian's schedule? People aren't going home in the summer, to help on the farm.
Right.
And it's not like we don't have
air conditioning. Is that where
conditioning.
that came from?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the farm was the act in the
So
summer.
just have it go all year and take less time? And
Yeah, and do you really need 4 years of this stuff? And
Right.
should all these crazy? I mean, somebody pointed out that there's some study that estimates that up to at least a third of all peer-reviewed academic literature is completely false,
made up, yeah.
invented. A third of it, right? So you have all these pompous, excuse my language, douchebags, going around giving themselves degrees and honoraria and speech opportunities, and you get to refer to as the distinguished professor of this and the honored president of that, and you're not even taking the time to check and make sure that the Clinton Foundation exists. I mean, it's like, and you're going around and you're saying, all right, well, we got the biggest endowment, financial endowment on the planet, but we need more money. So let's really make sure we know our donors, and let's take money from Jeffrey Epstein. And I'm not even sure they have that right. I mean, I contacted the president of Harvard myself and said, I don't think you've done, because they sent a letter to all
Aren't
alumni.
you a donor to Harvard? They should have some kind of special...
Well, no, they convened a task force to look into the... See, one trick that the fraudsters do, and we've encountered it in the Clinton Foundation, you put in your 990 to the IRS that you gave $5 million to Harvard. And the IRS they're not going to go to Harvard and say, could you please verify that schmuck over here gave you $5 million? It just suddenly you make $5 million. You make yourself look good. You gave $5 million to Harvard and nobody checks. Huh. And I have a suspicion that when you really get down to it, Epstein gave very little of his own money to any charity.
Why would they care about him if he didn't give them money? I mean,
the money came in. But not from, so Les Wexner may have given the money or somebody else may have given the money, but Epstein himself did not give much money on his own to any charitable project. He was trying to burnish his credentials. He was trying, you go in, and I see it a little bit, my family or my parents are donors to Yale, and my father gets invited to these events and stuff with fancy people, and if you show up at that event, everyone in the room understands that you're a substantial person. So to Pearson that at Harvard, with no connection to Harvard, no college degree of any type, suddenly you're interacting with the president of Harvard and this guy. There's another example. Right. It's it can be a way to improve your image. You write a check. If you're a billionaire, you write a check for $50 million. In the old days, what you do is you would contribute appreciated stock. So you have founder stock in Microsoft that you got for 10 cents. And today it's worth, the stock you want to give away is worth $50 million. You give that to Harvard in the old days, and you could take a tax deduction on the $50 million, even though it only cost you $100,000, let's say. And that $50 million gets, if you have American taxes, you get a large amount of money back from the IRS, and if you're in a high-tax state like New York, from New York. So,
now, but what about this, Charles? I didn't know that this guy, Hans-Jörg Wyss, has this Synthesis Holding AG. It's a multinational medical device manufacturer based in Switzerland and Westchester, Pennsylvania. It's the world's largest maker of implants to mend bone fractures. That's interesting. And also produces surgical power tools and advanced biomaterials. The Wyss Institute at Harvard is doing a lot of advanced research into nanobots and DNA robots. Mm-hmm. So forgive my ignorant simplification of this, but it seems to me that this guy could have a foundation at Harvard doing all kinds of research, being funded with tax-free dollars and getting all kinds of tax whatever. And I would bet that whatever comes out of those research experiments is going into the for-profit company and helping that grow. Seems crooked.
Well, again, if you don't have proper... There's a guy running for Congress, for the Senate, I think, either the Senate or governor in Massachusetts, Dr. Shiva, who is all over... the Doyle and Moynihan have talked to him at some length. And he's all over the question of whether Harvard and Partners in Health and the various operations up there and whatever they call it, and what do they call it? Pharmaceutical Alley or something? They call it something other than Silicon Valley. It's the equivalent of Silicon Valley. Whether that stuff is regulated properly. And I can tell you from what I've been able to see that the private benefits derived by the professors, by the donors,
is
huge. And in addition, the basic idea that an institution like Harvard, which has a gigantic financial endowment, would solicit money from its alumni, have this big endowment, and then at the same token go to the federal government and other governments around the world and say, we need more money to fund our research.
Doesn't this guy claim to have invented email?
Yeah, that guy. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's right.
She's married to Fran Drescher.
Still?
Isn't he? Honeymoons in France. I don't know when that's from, but they were married at some point. Yeah, Dr. Shiva, he was all over social media for a while. Well, this was 2014 they were married. It's a weird photo they've chosen to put there. Dr. Shiva Ayadurai. So he's running for Congress?
No, I think it's either Senate or governor.
Right. Well, that's a weird photo for this, whatever this is. That's us, celebrity news. What's a photo with no heads? I don't know. That's probably the mugshot of Ghislaine Maxwell. It's like, oh, no, that's her. Trust us. It's definitely her. So let's just talk about that for a second, Charles, because I remain convinced that I don't think they have her. And if they do, I don't think she's going to appear at the arraignment on Friday. And if she does, it would be by video. Because why would she leave France? She's French-born.
We don't know that she was in France.
Why not go to France?
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, let's hope. I mean, either the U.S. Justice Department, FBI, and IRS are completely incompetent, which
or corrupt.
Right, but we know that there were serious. We know that something was going on when Epstein left France to come to this country and was promptly arrested. In theory, we know. You believe he was arrested at...
Epstein, I believe, was arrested.
Right.
We saw a booking photo and a mugshot, and there's pictures of him in the jail. So, I think they faked the death to exfiltrate him, and I think they're doing something similar with her.
Well, so they get Epstein. My point is that in order for Epstein to have been arrested upon his arrival, we know that whenever that was in July, I think, of last year, 2019, we know that there was some sort of investigation that had culminated in Epstein's being arrested, and that any investigation that had done proper work would have noted the connections to Ghislaine Maxwell and to the Clintons. So we know that some sort of investigation has been going on, and we know that the FBI, for example, keeps these wall files, and we know that people with the highest security clearances, appropriate security clearances, could see the entire file. So if Barr or whoever's the right person, the worker bee for Barr, wanted to retrace what was going on, or if Durham wanted to retrace what was going on here, they could do that. And if they haven't done it, and nothing happens here, then we know there's massive corruption, right? If they have done it, what did they find? What did they choose not to find? And all of this is going to play out in the next several days. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see what happens.
We'll know in the next couple of days. I mean, one of the interesting things that Mike Moore pointed out last night, this indictment doesn't talk about anything that's happened since 1997. That's weird.
It's not, as another prosecutor explained, that in the U.S. apparently there's a specific, I haven't checked it myself, but the person claimed, former federal prosecutor, that the particular act having to do with sex trafficking of minors has no statute of limitations. So the way they were trying to thread the needle, according to this person, is it is arguable that the agreement reached in 2007 through 8 with Epstein may protect
from other stuff,
but possibly not from this 94 to 97 time frame. And what the objective of the prosecutors here is to get Maxwell across the line convicted on perjury, which she definitely committed perjury in her testimony. That's described in that indictment. So there should be a wider play here. A lot of questions need to be asked and answered about why it took so long to round Epstein up. Why so many? If we look at the what's his name, Folieri saga at the Clinton Global Initiative. You have a guy.
That's the guy who was dating Anne Hathaway?
Right, yeah. I mean, you should call the Clinton Initiative or the Clinton Global Initiative the Tall Tales Initiative. I mean, the guy shows up in New York, a handsome Italian guy, young kid, And he tells the following story, that his father is well connected in the Catholic Church, and because the Catholic Church has had problems with lawsuits over priests and others abusing little boys, they have to sell property, and they have surplus property in New York. Boy, he's back in the headlines.
Well, when is this from?
January 4th, 2018. So this guy claims that he has the ability to get kind of a first look on surplus property owned by the Catholic Church that could then be redeveloped.
Yeah, wasn't he like selling stuff in the Vatican or something?
I know, it's like it's selling the Brooklyn Bridge.
I was going to say,
right.
Maybe, yeah.
You know, and you know, are people skeptical in this great city? You know, where everyone's supposed to be so smart and cynical? No, the guy has a European accent. He's young. At the time, he was handsome. And next thing you know, he's dating Anne Hathaway. And Ron Burkle's giving him money, and the big billionaire who likes to fly, used to like Bill Clinton, fly around with Bill chasing women on another Lolita Express. They get into business. And at the Clinton Global Initiative, I want to say in either 2006 or 2007, they invite Folieri up on stage because, of course, what he's done is created the Folieri Foundation, which is going to, you know...
He looks like he's 15.
Yeah, the Flim Flam Man Foundation. And it's just, you know, you might trust the guy to give you advice on what kind of pasta to have or what wine to have with your pasta, but...
How do you meet a woman like Anne Hathaway? That's the only thing I want to know from this guy.
Right. You learn how to speak with an Italian accent.
First thing you do is create a huge scam, and then the next thing you do is go to Hollywood. Now, Charles, Miss Winnie is telling me that Maxwell couldn't leave the U.S. because she was cooperating with the Department of Justice. We don't have any evidence of that.
We don't know that yet.
And if you were in France, you could still cooperate. The Department of Justice could go to Paris and speak to somebody. Yeah. Doesn't make sense that she would not have gone there.
But in the fullness of time, we will hopefully find out.
Yes. Well, Charles, we've covered quite a bit of material today. There is one other thing I wanted to tell you. You know, just this morning, the Crowdsource the Truth Periscope channel was totally deactivated. Periscope sent me an email. I tried to log in there. It says this account has been deactivated. Contact Periscope, technical whatever, and I did, and they haven't written back. Now, I didn't get any kind of warning
explanation,
like you did X, Y, or Z, or this video got a strike, or whatever. I do know that there are social engineers constantly active. Even during this broadcast, people are telling me that lying social engineers who I know have put out false stories about Larry Klayman, false stories about all kinds of things, apparently speaking about me as we were in this broadcast. Additionally, since this weekend, more than 2,000 YouTube subscribers have been unsubscribed from the Crowdsource the Truth YouTube channel. And this is quite strange because when I look at the channel, it still tells me that there's 112,000 subscribers on there, right?
Right.
That does look like it says 112K, right?
It does.
But you see, when we come over here in the YouTube studio where it gives us some more detailed information, look at that.
Yeah, well, math is not a strong point of the YouTube enterprise.
I mean, what do we think that this means?
But this says it's up 2,800 in the last 28 days, too.
Right. So how is it that 2,000 have disappeared just over the weekend? I don't really get it. But the point I'm getting at is there's something weird going on. And the best thing for people to do is to join us and become sponsors on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. There will now be a series of comments that will recommend that I get onto DLive and BitChute. Those are two platforms I've been on for about 3 years. So if proponents of those platforms don't even know that I'm there, and I've been there, BitChute, there's over 1,500 subscribers, many thousand videos. So if people promoting those platforms don't know that I'm there, they obviously don't have a very good reach. I recommend that those people become sponsors, because the other thing is, it's not just about escaping the control of YouTube or Periscope or whatever. I really do need a way for this to be sustainable. We travel around at great risk and do a lot of work. So hopefully people will join. As little as $2 per month, you're going to get access to a huge library of sponsor-exclusive videos, and I hope people will join us over there. Anything else you wanted to talk about, Charles?
Well, I just add to that and say that in my own personal experience in recent days, I've noticed that it is a lot more difficult to post links to conservative websites, to actually visit, to go from Google to a conservative website. I had the experience where arbitrarily my email was just canceled. And it turned out it was my fault. I had used up more than my quota of storage. And then I tried to delete old email, and it was just incredibly cumbersome to try to do that. And so I just succumbed, and I said, okay, I'll pay for more storage. I get a ton more storage. So I think big tech is certainly getting ready to do what it can to make sure that the same thing that happened in 2016, that I think we were all involved in making our comments known, voices known. I was very much involved making comments about the Clinton Foundation and related frauds. And perhaps that had an impact on the 2016 election. Maybe it didn't. But I think big tech is gearing up to tilt the blogosphere solidly in favor of the demented Joe Biden, who, I mean, honestly, the recent comments, I mean, I've
transform the nation?
Well, we've heard that before from Barack Obama, but saying, I'm Joe Biden's husband.
That's great.
I mean, that's...
I mean, these are real medical signs of a guy needing help.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think those signs have been evident for a while. I mean, as one of our friends points out, all you need to do is go back to 1988 and put up his speech where he dropped out of the presidential race because he lied. He said he was top of his class at law school, or bottom of his class. He said that something he had written was his when in fact it had been plagiarized. Then he lied about it being, and he dropped out. He said, "I lied. I did this wrong. I'm that wrong." Obviously, play that in 1988. It hasn't gotten any better.
But also, Charles, isn't it a symptom of dementia? I mean, look, it's always a bad idea to start confrontations with people and stuff like that. But if you're almost 80 and you're challenging people to fights, isn't that a sign of dementia?
Well, it's not great judgment.
It's not good judgment.
And you're looking here. I mean, one of the things that we can say is that the presidency is a role that somebody should take who has executive experience.
Right.
Being a good talker, being a writer, rapper, an actor or whatever, that is not the same as listening to the experts, distilling down the bullshit, get the bullshit out and seek the truth, and then make an informed decision. You make the final call. The buck stops with you. You got to have that kind of experience. There's none of that experience in the Senate. The Senate is all about, if you vote for my bill, I'll vote for your bill, and you do this and that. Horse trading, and I'll get you to this party, and we'll go on this trip together. How'd you like to go to this restaurant? How'd you like to have this intern? I mean, it has nothing to do with the skills that are required, particularly in 2020 and beyond, as the world looks at the present order disintegrating, the rising threat of China, chaos in the Middle East, on and on, divisions in this country. You need somebody who's experienced at diving into a problem, understanding the real problem, addressing the problem, learning from any mistakes, communicating effectively. That is certainly not Joe Biden. And you certainly don't want to install a president, somebody whose son, I want to address this one I just thought of actually, whose son, we now learn, owns 10% of a private equity firm backed by the Chinese government.
When did we learn that?
It was released yesterday. That
Hunter Biden?
Yeah, so the idea is this, and I had experience in this world. When you go and, I go to you, Jason, I say, look, I got this idea. You got this crowdsource the truth thing. It's going to be, why don't we do a fund? We'll do a private equity fund in new media. And I'm Hunter Biden. I have this friend who runs the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to get $1 billion. We can't say it came from the Chinese Communist Party. We'll pretend some Chinese billionaire gave it to us. We're going to put it into a fund, and we're going to assemble new media properties around the world using my great name, my father's connections. He's going to be president of the United States. And you, Hunter Biden, because you're a crackhead schmuck, what you're really going to do is you're going to fly around.
Just go to the strip club.
You go to the strip club, fly around with your dad. Don't open your mouth and express a view as to any investment idea, because we don't give a shit what you think about investing. But in exchange for your father's name and the connections, we're going to give you a 10% interest in this fund or maybe the firm. That is, can be, if Hunter's case, it would be, a disaster. You'd say, no, please, that's worth nothing. Hunter Biden's involved. But, an argument can be made that this interest that he has.
Oh, it's Andrew Kerr writing this.
Yeah, he's really good. Andrew.
That's great.
Yeah. So, they take him off the board, but he still holds a 10% ownership stake. I mean, that seems...
Crack's not going to pay for itself, Charles.
I know, but I mean, this is strictly forbidden. As you're the Vice President of the United States, you can't have your son, taking an economic interest that could be extremely valuable under certain... In exchange for what? He's off the board? Why does he deserve 10% of the ownership stake in this entity? And, in my experience, in the private equity world, you want to talk about mathematically astute, financially astute people. You go up against that world without understanding the way that world works, and you will walk out from the business meeting naked, having lost all of your assets, probably, in debt out your ass. Because, these are sharks. These are people who really understand precisely how investments of the good firms, how they work, how they don't work, what you bargain for, what you don't bargain for. And here's a guy taking 10% ownership stake in this company. Now, Joe Biden was asked, what do you know about your son's business dealings? And he said, we don't discuss it.
I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably true.
Maybe you should be president.
Yeah.
It's if you have, this Hunter, he's had problems. Lots of problems.
I don't believe that he doesn't discuss stuff with his father.
Of course he discusses
This is a troubled kid who,
Right.
after the death of the mother, would probably be extremely close to the father. All the pictures, the body language, their interactions are suggestive that this is a highly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Close. Is it close?
Doted over almost.
And so
He looks like a clone of him, to tell you the truth. I think that they developed some sort of human cloning procedure, and they did it to George Bush. They did it to Joe Biden. It's not quite working yet. You always get somebody a little stupider than the source.
Right. Now, it's one thing to in the Trump family to say, what we're going to do. It's not called, the Goodman Organization or a foundation. It's called the Trump Organization. And if they want to say that, the father may have started it and Donald takes it over and Donald decides who takes it over after him, and it's only going to be a Trump person and 100% of the stock is owned by the Trump family, there's nothing wrong with that. The second, however, that you're the Vice President of the United States and you're on point for Ukraine and you're negotiating with China and you're letting your son, take this valuable gift from some dodgy Chinese people, and you don't disclose any of this to the regulators properly, and the media, of course, is asleep. They don't care.
What happened to? I wanted to bring up this one other thing before we end about Trump's niece, who put up this book saying that Trump was abused by his father. So this was the other thing I wanted to say, Charles, is that it's possible that they do have Ghislaine Maxwell, but if they do, I think they're trying to position it as something to use against Trump. So Mary Trump says Trump was abused by his father, but didn't Trump love his father and everything was...
Yeah, I think this kind of stuff, who knows what really happened in the past.
But she's a PhD and a psychologist. Isn't that totally irresponsible for a professional like that to release this type of...
My understanding is that a psychiatrist is the medical doctor, and a
psychologist, right,
is not the medical doctor. So what her real training is, I don't know. She certainly could not responsibly diagnose her uncle, especially given the bad blood between her and Donald. So this is the kind of thing, who published this piece of trash? Was it Simon & Schuster?
I'm trying to think about, my cousins and stuff have no knowledge of the business dealings of myself or my father, my mother, my brother. They don't know. They know what our jobs are, but how would they have any insight into...
Yeah.
It's very weird. The other thing is, I think everybody can think of some family member who would say X, Y, or Z about them that would just be like, that's totally wrong, and this person has a laundry list of crap I could say about them.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, it's just,
It's just like the John Bolton book. It's just like a drive-by book shooting.
Yeah, well, I assume that Donald Trump and company will, rebut each of these claims. But for all I know, and who knows what's really going on in the intimate secrets of a family, but I have heard Donald Trump repeatedly talk about his love for his father and mother, and he certainly was close to his father in business. And the notion that I don't know if they mean psychologically abused or sexually abused or whatever. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that he was demanding.
Although also it wouldn't be surprising if you grew up in that era and you did something bad and your father smacked you with a belt or something. Like everybody did that then, right?
Yeah, but I hope that she's not suggesting that he was sexually abused.
That's what it felt like, from the articles.
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either. But in other words, that would be a lead-in to have Maxwell appear on video, which could be, you name it. Maybe she is in France, maybe she's lying, maybe they've got a deep fake video. Like in terms of how to frame him, I know this all sounds ridiculous to talk about it like this, but when you think about the number of deceptions that have been perpetrated already, the notion that they would like pretend to arrest Maxwell to do something is not that far a leap. They've got the whole world locked down for a virus that, do you know anybody that has died from coronavirus? No. Every person I ask, with rare exception, maybe 2 to 3% of people say, oh yeah, my neighbor's mom, well, not her mom.
I heard.
Yeah. It's like, what?
Yeah.
If this is such a pandemic, how come the homeless guys that were spitting in my face outside of Bellevue Men's Home, I didn't get sick from them? The other thing I was thinking about is, did you notice the elevator, they now have a permanent sign with masks and people where to stand. It's like etched instead of just the printed out thing. Right. For almost 50 years, you go into Penn Station in the elevator, it smells like vomit, it smells like piss. You're exposed to a lot of germs, a lot of viruses everywhere you go. Tom Hanks is saying like coronavirus kills people. It's like, yeah, but so does smoking, so does driving around in a car. So does, name whatever else you could get. And suddenly this is the thing we need to shut down the entire world over?
And perversely, the arguments they're making on more cases, solely focusing on more cases, undercut the argument that it's a serious problem. Because if you that the cases skyrocket, but the deaths are going down.
That means a lot of people are able to self-resolve.
Right, exactly. And so, and who knows how far back this COVID-19 may have been circulating around the world. So the fundamental math of it has been all wrong, as we said day one. And also, they're trying to make hay over the fact that hospitals are now overloaded.
But I don't think that's true.
But because people deferred elective surgeries. It's not because of COVID.
Oh. Yeah. Well, the thing that's really interesting is that Andrew Cuomo has become a super active tweeter.
Really?
And I think you know what this means in Brazil.
What do you know what it means in New York?
What?
Isn't that the white nationalist symbol? Okay.
Oh, I don't know. I thought that was right. Maybe they made a big deal of it. In Brazil, this means you're an asshole.
Right.
So he's letting everybody know what he's all about. But it's, he keeps putting out these tweets. He's like, more tests does not mean, he was saying like, oh, no pregnancy test? You're not pregnant. He's being a total social engineer, because it's a simple fact that if you say, hey, there's this disease called coronavirus. Well, how many people in New York have it? Don't know, haven't tested anybody. Test 100 people today and 1 person has it. Test 1,000 people tomorrow and 10 people have it. Test 10,000 people and it's like, okay, it's still the same percentage of people who have it, but as we test more, there's a larger number of infected people. The question that's really relevant is, how many infected people actually become sick from the infection, and how many sick people are unable to recover? Then we know how deadly it is. He's just pushing.
Right. And last I checked, he was a moron, not a medical doctor.
It's amazing, Charles. Well, with that, I think we've covered quite a bit today, and we will be back on Sunday for another wonderful adventure. And I will see you then. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank all the generous sponsors who make the show possible. I have some interesting guests lined up for tomorrow. We're going to surprise everybody. It's an international guest, so I'm going to say who it is, but people should tune in. And thanks for watching.